uh, crisis management for COVID-19. Week 10, can you believe it? We're 2.5 months into this. And we started right off the bat. So I kind of measure, that's sort of how long things have been crazy. We've got a bunch of legal updates, kind of unbelievable, you all, how much stuff came in over the weekend. So Jim, our attorney, doesn't get to start this stuff until Sunday night. He starts putting things together because he found when he was doing it back on Friday, he had to redo it all over the weekend. And that would have been the same case this weekend, a lot of stuff. But we also have some other great speakers to share with you. You know what, we're trying to, we ask a bunch of people, you know, what are your, do you have best practices? How are you making this thing work? And we've got 3 representatives. We've got John Greene from Keeneland. We've got Erin Sharp, Vice President of Manufacturing at Kroger. We've got Drew Millar. He's the Vice President of Human Resources for Tempur Sealy International for North America. And they're all going to share some of their experiences. Now, I know we've got people on this call that are smaller employers and large employers, but I feel like at this point, I wanted the larger ones because they have more people working on this thing and have come up with some good ideas and ways to make this thing happen. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. I'm really delighted Allison is back and going to help us with questions along with Autumn Morris. And Chase Adams is in the background kind of keeping everything rolling. We're going to move right along because we have way more slides than in the past. We've got a lot of good information to share with you. We're going to start out with a legal and regulatory update that Jim's been working on this weekend. Then we're going to jump to our special speakers. So actually, Drew is going to start with Tempur Sealy, then John, and then Erin from Kroger. I think you're going to get a lot of it. We're going to wrap up with some feedback on healthy at work and some question and answers. We're not going to have quite as many question and answer sessions as we did last week because we'll never get through if we don't. So thank you. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Jim, take it away.
All right, so I want to give you some updates. I'm going to fly through these so we can hopefully get to everybody. We will have question and answer at the end. You can send questions. I'll try to answer once I'm done with my part. So the SBA and the Treasury issued multiple quote-unquote final preliminary rules. I went ahead and took a screenshot so you can see just how quick things change and how much I'm trying to keep up with things. So if you look at this slide, you'll notice that from the 14th to the 22nd, an 8-day period, there were 5 interim final rules. I don't know what the heck an interim final rule is because they change from one to the other. I know what they're supposed to be. The problem we're now running into is that their policies and their rules are not the same from week to week, day to day, and rule to rule. One of the issues in the most recent rule is that, if you will recall, we talked about the frequently asked questions, and their policy in the frequently asked questions said you're bound by the frequently asked questions that existed on the day that you either accepted your loan, signed the document, filed your loan forgiveness, whatever. There is, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, there's actually a statement made that those are, quote, non-binding frequently asked questions. Now, I don't know whether that means non-binding on you or non-binding on the SBA, but when you look at this bottom one, this bottom one, let me get my laser pointer working. If you look at everybody, can you understand? It said I was unstable for a second, which people say all the time. This bottom rule here basically says the SBA is going to come after people. So that's a concern. So I want to make sure that everybody understands what we are getting ready to walk through here. So the guidelines, critical updates on May 22nd, 2 of them. One of them is for lenders. I'm not going to go into a lot of issues with the lender rule and the SBA I'm coming after you rule. But the SBA basically issued a final interim rule that says that they have the right to come after everybody. And they're going to. And they're not limited to the $2 million. They can come after anybody and everybody at any point in time, including the lenders. Critical update on the other one, payroll costs. I want to make sure everybody understands this because a lot of questions have been asked about how do you get to the 75%. And there's an algebraic calculation now that accountants can help you out with, and it does include the 1/3 and how you get to that, I wouldn't use it. It's just don't spend more than 75% on, make sure you spend at least 75% on payroll. Otherwise, only the 75% of everything to that level will be allowed. Basically, you take 1/3 of the amount that you paid, add that on, and that's all you can do. So, payroll costs. One of the things that's tucked in there is vacation, parental, family, medical, sick leave, separation, and I bolded the and retirement in here because a lot of small companies have figured out you can actually use this for retirement plans, including SEP plans, employer contributions, and other parts that can help you come up to the 75%. So if you're a small employer and you've done a SEP or any type of other plan, and again, I'm not a tax specialist, but they literally put in the final rule, retirement. So keep that in mind. That's an added. Vacation. You'll see here in just a minute, they actually cover bonuses, and it's discretionary bonuses. And that is a big change from what I told you in week 2 and week 3. And I will apologize like I have all the way through with the caveat, which is I only know what I know today because they keep changing the rules. Well, the bonuses, they literally said no bonuses unless they were part of compensation. Now they've had incentives and they don't limit it. So you'll see that in a minute. Non-payroll costs eligible. They actually have talked about this and spelled it out. I know I spoke a little bit about it last week, but I just want to make sure you're clear. It's either what's paid or what's incurred and paid at the next regular billing date. That's critical as well because that gives you some expansion on either end, the before or the after. As long as you are paying it or incurring it. In fact, the new rules allow for a suggestion, and I'm not sure how far I would go with this, but if you deferred rent until you started to get the 8-week pay, you have the ability, according to some, to go back and pay back paid rent or back owed rent that was not paid before the 56-day time period starts. Utilities. This is an interesting one because I can't figure out what one of them is. You'll notice the highlighters on transportation. I have no clue what transportation utilities are, nor does anyone else that I've seen on the internet since Friday night. But utilities includes expenses for the distribution of electricity, gas, water, transportation, telephone, or internet access. I don't know whether the transportation means that you can pay for your employees' gas. Unfortunately, when it says distribution of internet and all the rest of the things, that means that your cloud-based services, your VPN, and other expenses that are not distribution of internet are not included. But it does allow for some expansion. Also, keep in mind, as I talked about from week 3 on, there is a inclusion for mortgages, not mortgage principal, but interest, as well as leases on vehicles, printers, copiers, machinery, anything else that you use in your day-to-day that you have a lease on. There's also, and I'm not going to give legal guidance on this, there's quite a bit of talk about increasing value of pre-existing leases if there is a inter-corporate loan, like from one subsidiary to a parent, that you can raise the rent because it doesn't preclude fair market value rent, even if you were doing it at a reduced value. So there's some other ways to pay that money and be legitimate. You need to talk to a CPA about the best way to make sure you're in compliance. All right, compensation paid to furloughed employees, bonuses, and hazard pay are legitimate payroll costs. That is a reversal from what I had told you before. Just want you to understand that that's brand new guidance Friday night. Again, if you're going to pay furloughed employees to stay at home, if you're going to pay bonuses, if you're going to pay hazard pay, you're in luck. You can do that. Get guidance, though, because I'm telling you some of these things and what the SBA is going to do with their investigations, especially if you're above the $2 million threshold that we talked about before, be very careful. Now, here are the downsides. Employee owners, they don't define what that means, but employee owners that count toward the forgiveness cannot exceed the lesser of $15,385, which is amortized as $100,000 per year, or 8/52 of their 2019 compensation plus health and pension costs. The problem with that is it doesn't answer for new businesses that had less earnings in 2019. So if you're a new business owner, if you just bought in, like in a law firm, let's say you just bought in as an owner, a shareholder of a company, if you didn't have 52 weeks of pay, this literally spells out you take whatever you got in 2019, divide it by 52, multiply it times 8, and that's the maximum of what you can get as an employee owner. I believe they'll need to correct that again with another final interim rule, but right now the rule final is if you have a shareholder and you are an owner of a company, a partner, anything else, you get 8/52 or 15,385, whichever is the least. That is not good news. The other is, so that's why I said, what about new businesses or owners that did not draw full salary? That creates a problem. There is no forgiveness provided for retirement or health insurance for self-employed or partners. So if I have anyone on here that did not have a regular employee draw, but you lived on a partnership draw, you need some tax guidance because they have really stabbed that. They're not allowing any kind of additional assistance for self-employed individuals, and you need to be very careful. The last thing is I gave you an update last week on the good faith offer of employment, and I have used this with 3 different employers last week, and as soon as I'm done with the call with you, I've got to contact them to tell them we've got work to do. This deals with the calculation of full-time equivalent employees. You have to have full-time equivalent employees, or you have to prove that you did a good faith offer of employment that was rejected. Last week, we talked about the first 3, or the first part, this first bullet. Good faith written offer for rehire, same salary and hours earned at the last pay period before the COVID-19 shutdown, rejected by an employee. That was what the guidance was. My recommendation last week, make sure you keep records. That's the same. This last one is shocking to me, and it changes the whole dynamic. And it creates problems because the letters have already gone out to employees. We wrote them very carefully to comply with the guidance that then existed. And I use NARC because basically that's what it says. You are required to tattletale on your employees. You will provide a list to your state's unemployment office alerting them that you gave an offer, that the employee rejected it, and that the employee did not follow through with an offer. They intend to go after employees for the $600 federal monies. This last one is a huge issue. And then the next ridiculous thing is, so they come out with a final rule on May 22nd, and it says in the final rule, further guidance will be issued on how to NARC on your employees on the SBA's website, and soon to be additional final rule notifications from the federal government. I'm not sure how that's going to work. My recommendation is, if you've done what I've recommended, and this is what I'm going to tell my clients when I get off the phone and call them, I think you send a list to the unemployment office right now while it's in such disarray, and you're going to hear about that here in a second as well. Send a list right now so that you've done your job, but you're not full out narking on your employees. And if they lose it or don't follow through, don't open the spreadsheet, then they haven't done their job, because you're not trying to tattletale on your employees. You're not trying to ruin them. You've sent them an offer. They have turned it down. You may feel like you want to report that. You may not, but the way they're handling it is a little scary right now. So I would recommend, if you don't really want to get into ruining relationships with your employees, then I would send it now before they get things organized. You may have to follow up later depending on whatever that further guidance is, but I would do it now while they're in disarray. All right. So just a couple of things that are kind of reiterating what I've already talked about, but I just want to make sure we cover it. An employee who's fired for cause, voluntarily resigns, voluntarily requests a schedule reduction will not be counted. It does not include, for whatever reason, what if an employee dies, but the onus is on you to prove that the employee rejected the position or was fired for cause. And so now the question is, do we have to have death certificates? Do we have to go out and, I mean, there's so many things that they're not answering, but I just want you to know, if they're fired for cause, voluntarily resign, or voluntarily request a reduction, they will not be counted, but you have to document, and you have to show that to your lender. Full-time equivalent is now fully defined. It is an employee who works 40 hours or more on average each week. That's interesting because for the Obamacare has a different definition of who a full-time employee is. They're taking a different stance than they did before. I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. So they do not address whether an owner, employee, or partner is considered in the head count. They also don't address whether an owner, employee, spouse, significant other, child, grandchild, or other related is somehow an owner because they can benefit through the owner. Those are some issues. The employee reduction once, this is kind of common sense, but there were some concerns that it may not. If you reduce salary and hours, it only counts once, either toward hours or salary. The AICPA, I was going to put the full link on here, but that link was ridiculously long, and it goes to an Excel spreadsheet. You can, they allow you to modify it to your own organization. So go there, grab it. It's a little more cumbersome than a few others out there, but you have to pay for the others. So it's a free one, and it includes guidance on how to do these calculations. They redid it on the 21st. I look for additional updates because the 22nd changed some things. They're going to have to go in and change it again. And as soon as they change it, then the SBA and the Treasury will come out with their new modifications, I'm sure. Additional guidance issued later. This is the one that's at the bottom of that first slide. Basically, it declared the teeth of the SBA to go after you all and the lenders. It scared the lenders a little bit with the requirements that they're going to have them have to do. They have the ability to, and I just short shrifted it because it's like 29 pages long. They can review any loan application, forgiveness application, or any other provision. And then, here we have 48 now. Frequently, I was going to pull it down. There's a brand new frequently asked question on the 19th. The one that's on the 19th basically is for lenders. It's a form that had to be filed within 10 days after disbursement of monies. They've now extended that to the 29th of May. But the frequently asked questions in this, they've got a tremendous number of frequently asked questions. So be very careful to read through those if you have questions about it because it's ongoing changes. So I don't know what these marks are on here. I don't know if somebody else is doing those. They weren't on there before. I apologize if you see those. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is Kentucky WorkShare. For anybody out there that's using WorkShare, and I'm going to be very kind with what I have to say, but I got an alert on Saturday from the Kentucky Unemployment Insurance Commission that says there is no Kentucky WorkShare, there is no Kentucky short-time compensation, and wrongly indicating that there is, that Kentucky doesn't have unemployment, that it is run by the United States Department of Labor. So I want to walk through this with you because if you're going to do this, you need to make sure you have the ability to fix things. First, this is the regulation 787 KAR 1:350E, signed into law by the governor's office on May the 1st, 2020. Because it's an emergency regulation, it was not subject to a delay. It became law upon execution because he had his authority during an emergency to issue that. It clearly states in there that the employer may have to pay 1/2 of the costs if the Department of Labor does not accept. That means that it's not contingent on acceptance by the Department of Labor. It is, in fact, the law, unless it's set aside. So it is our law. Saturday, they said Department of Labor controls. They don't. They said that Kentucky does not recognize it until they accept it. They do. Employees are not able to claim, they said employees are able right now, go ahead and claim reduced hours. Problem is, if your employees claim hours at all, they're being completely wiped out from state, which wipes them out from federal. If you have been able to do this without your mass, if you are a large employer and you've been able to do your mass reduction, they're treating you differently. They're basically hand carrying mass applications through on the back end and doing things without going through the system. So if you're a large employer and you did a mass layoff, mass reduction in force, mass short-time compensation, this may not apply to you. I'd love to hear from you if it did, or if you got through, either one. But anybody who's not a mass, which is the large amount of the people I represent, they did not get benefits, and their employees are being flat denied across the board. System's still broken. There is no application. There is no guidance. In fact, the new handbook is still not available, and the old handbook was deleted on Saturday. And I don't know where it is right now. No, I don't have it. I accidentally closed out of it. I have the broken link for the COVID-19 employer handbook, which is on everything from the University of Kentucky, the Louisville Chamber of Commerce, the Lexington Chamber of Commerce. They all linked to the PDF that was created on April the 13th for employers to understand what they're supposed to do. Kentucky Unemployment Insurance has deleted that from their website, so it is not what they're now recommending, but they have not changed it. You can't do your applications. You can't get any work-share guidance because they don't have any on their website. It's been filed, so employers need to take advantage of it, and then you'll need to try to fix it after the fact. That's the only thing I can tell you to do. So I want to share this with you. These are actual quotes from the Unemployment Insurance Commission to actual employers. Most of these are my clients. You probably got the same thing because it was cut and pasted. I'm putting this up on the screen because any of you, and I have heard from multiple of you who are trying to do the work share, asking me what status is, where's the KAR, where did you hear these things, how is this happening? Our employees are accusing us of treating people unfairly and lying to them. These are direct quotes out of the Kentucky this is from Workshare at the Kentucky Unemployment Insurance Commission. It talks about them all being the same: furlough, temporary, short-time leave. Some of the things in here are not accurate, but it talked about a reduction in hours. You still have a job, you're just not working as many hours, or your salary has been reduced. Kentucky is allowing individuals to file for unemployment in all three of these situations, and the process is the same. It does not matter whether it's work share, layoff, furlough. It's all the same unemployment system here in Kentucky. It's not, but keep treating it like it is. Hopefully down the road they fix it. I'm concerned some of your employees are going to lose their federal, but we'll fight that battle with the state. It's allowing unemployment benefits to be paid to employees who are experiencing a severe shortage, and this option to pursue in lieu of a complete layoff. This is where they say there is a work share program. The third one down here, the system doesn't yet know what work share is, so it's still processing everything the same way. Your employees, whether they are working 0 hours or partial hours, will still file claims and request their benefits. We wanted to eventually pay 20% of benefits if hours have been reduced by 20, but it's currently not configured that way. They're working on the functionality as she types. That was on April the 10th. I hope somebody's still typing. Despite the limited system capabilities, your employees won't be denied eligibility. The only reason they would not receive is if they're making too much money, which, as we talked about before, was clearly false, was rejected by the governor and several other people on our webinars, and yet people are being denied. I will tell you that this is very close to some type of legal action being taken. I've been asked by several of my employers to look into it. I mean, this is just, it is, by the time they get it fixed, all of the finances that were there for the short time compensation, which we talked about 3 weeks ago, how little that is, won't be there. But I have, I think, 8 applications pending, and all they've said is this doesn't exist, so your application isn't accurate, so we're not going to address it. But yet they've told people in these emails, just submit them, and I've got more where they say, just give us the last 4 of the social security number and the name and how many hours are being reduced, and then just start it. So there are people who have already started it and they're okay, but you can't start one now because they won't get it fixed. So that's the unemployment insurance issue. Last thing I want to talk a little bit about. We've had several questions that have come up about what the difference is between a mandate and a suggestion or a guideline. And I wanted to walk through this with you because I am the one who has been asked to give the legal update. And so I'm not being asked to give, just a risk assessment or HR, which I do for my clients when we're going through how to handle legal issues and whether to push it or not. But the laws that are implemented with regard to this are implemented in a couple of ways. They can say should, shall, must, or could, or words to that effect. And I had one up. I'm hoping I can find it to drag down on the screen for you. I'm going to work on it while I'm talking. But there are some, in the governor's mandate that was issued during this Healthy at Work initiative. I thought it was a great way to show you the concerns about this. I'm going to put it down on the screen. So the governor issued his mandate on May 11th, and this is the mandate. So in the mandate, you scroll down, I'm going to get past the letter, and they talk about minimum requirements for all entities. Each entity must meet the following minimum requirements. But then it talks about should operate, encouraged to implement, must ensure. Those are the types of things that if I see something from a regulation, a statute, or a governor mandate that says should, then I tell you that you have discretion in that. It's not a mandated, it's not a must. It's a possibility. Then if they tell you, like this one, to the greatest extent practicable, you must ensure that they have these. Well, that gives you some wiggle room in certain areas with regard to PPP. The problem that you have is when they get down to the hand sanitizer, it's not a problem. You must supply adequate. You must encourage. So the encourage gives you some leeway in how do you encourage and what are you going to do. You must sanitize. There is no leeway there in accordance with the CDC guidelines. And keep in mind, all of these were, if you can't do this, you can't open. These are minimum requirements as set forth below, or you must wait to reopen until you're able to do so. Where we ran into problems and where things become muddy is down here under the conduct daily. They must require employees to undergo daily, and now they've explained how to do that in some ways. You must ensure the testing plan. You must make reasonable accommodations, which is under CDC and EEOC and so on. We've talked about that. You must designate the Healthy at Work officer. You must educate your employees, and you must be prepared to assist on the contact. And the 2 questions I've had are the Healthy at Work and the contact notification. Those are scary because they're musts without any leeway. And then when you scroll down to what that means, the health and temperature screening, that's spelled out. And it has musts in temperature, 100.4, all the different things, and we've talked about those, okay? Then you've got the Healthy at Work contact notification. And this question came up to me from my clients and a couple of them this week from some of you saying, you're talking mandatory and yet I'm used to things being discretionary. Why is this? Why are you saying this? I mean, how in the world are we going to do this? And I'm taking Kroger, for example, and no, they didn't talk to me. And I know they're on the phone. Grocery store. How in the world are we going to know all of the tracing on contacts for every customer that came in contact or potentially came in contact with an employee at the Kroger or Walmart or Walgreens or any of the big companies? So the problem here is it is a must. And then if you look at what's required here, all of these things are mandated. So you must know the work schedule. That's easy. Where were they working? That's okay. What was the last day? Who could have come in contact, including all employees, all customers, all clients, all visitors. So back to the list for just a second, and then we're going to jump in with some of the employers and find out how they're handling this. But when a governor declares 14 must be adhered to, some of these you have no wiggle room, because if they are a must without encouraged or should or recommendations, you are mandated either to close or to comply. So the Healthy at Work, that concerns me. And it concerns me because there is no wiggle room. And we talk about this later about how we've given recommendations to the governor. The biggest thing I suggested for all of you and every client I have is if we designate somebody in good faith, and we do this to the best of our ability, we need immunity from lawsuits, from customers, from employees, from visitors, because we don't want to get challenged on whether we complied with a nebulous, unknown, Healthy at Work officer that the governor says, oh, we left it loose so that you guys can figure it out. Well, great. What if we get sued? We need some kind of immunity that says if we've done this in good faith, we don't get hit with liability. We've also recommended a job description, at least some level of minimum requirement so that we know what's required. You're going to hear about that a little bit later. And in a nutshell, a legal discussion from me is a legal opinion. It may not be the best way to go because you have to do risk analysis and you have to make your own decisions from an HR. And HR risk management includes business opinion, which balances all the legal, the financial, the accounting, and the risk management. Those are the differences between when I'm just giving a legal or when I'm answering things broad-based. So I just wanted to cover that because we've had a lot of discussion on that. All right, so that's it, Lyle, and we're on to Drew.
All right, we're going to move along. If people have questions, fire them into us on the chat box and we'll try to cover them. Very excited about having Drew Millar here today. He's the Vice President of Human Resources for North America for Tempur Sealy. He is an attorney, worked on their legal staff before shifting over to HR, a super guy to work with. Drew, are you there?
Here.
Great, glad you're here. And why don't you take it away and share with us some of the comments, some of the material you have on your slides.
Will do. Thanks, Lyle. You can see here I've got my my mask on. I am in the office today, and we've been bringing some people back that have offices allow for better social distancing. So we're certainly complying with that and doing everything the best we can. And I'll just echo what Jim said. I think I've found as I've been doing this now for the last 10 weeks as one of the lead folks on our COVID-19 response, that things are evolving every day. People want to know all the details on what we should do a month from now. Well, the guidance is coming out and is usually behind what we're already doing. And so we're doing our best and trying our best to make sure we provide a safe workplace for our employees. But I think we all got to keep that in mind that we're dealing with unprecedented times here. So obviously, a few of the main things that the governor's guidance talks about that we've been trying to implement here is establishing policies and procedures for the return to work. Things like temp checks, we do temp checks, and I've got some pictures here on the next slide that we'll show you in a minute. But got temp checks, social distancing, where we've marked things off on the floor in common areas to try to keep people apart when heating up food at microwaves or things like that. We've instituted more widespread cleaning procedures that happen on a daily basis, where we've hired additional cleaning staff that is cleaning round the clock, basically, in the building, workstations, as well as common areas, just to make sure that cleaning is done. And then PPE, foremost with that, is masks, and then we also make gloves available to employees that would like to wear those. One of the things that comes up a lot, and I've had some experience with this, is handling suspected or confirmed cases. So with us being a large manufacturer and having manufacturing plants across the U.S. that for the most part stayed open during this crisis because of the work we provide to hospitals and other beds and things like that, it's been interesting to work through that with the health department and handling those cases. So I think being prepared that way of how you will handle this, developing flow charts or things that way, there's a lot of good things out there online that you can use, but just making sure you have a procedure and then refining that as you go. What we thought was going to be our exact procedure 6 weeks ago, we refined as we started to have more of these suspected or confirmed cases, and so we've been working through those as we do. Providing accommodations to folks is obviously a legal issue under the ADA, but making sure that we provide those accommodations where needed. They may be requested for a variety of reasons. Child care is one, but doesn't necessarily apply under the ADA, but high-risk categories with age or pre-existing medical conditions is obviously one that we've got to keep in mind all the time with our employees and not putting someone in harm's way, especially as they request accommodations and make us aware of their needs. And then the thing that I'm going to focus on probably for the rest of my few minutes is just the importance of educating and informing employees. I think for a lot of folks on the call, myself included, we've been living this for 8 to 10 weeks and looking at these things on a daily basis. But not all of your employees are aware of every step that you've taken, especially when they haven't been at work. They've all been watching the news. They've all been learning about these things, and many have different views on it. But most of them haven't been at work during this time. And so bringing them back, they've got a lot of questions in their mind about how we're dealing with these things, and making sure that we educate them and make them aware of what we're doing is critical. So if we want to go to the next slide, this is where I put some pictures of some of the stuff that we've got going. Top left there, we've got a lot of sanitation supplies, where we've got hand sanitizing stations throughout our corporate campuses. That's actually a picture of North Carolina that we've got there, but making sure that hand sanitizers are available and wipes and things like that, as well as some signage to educate employees. You can see our temp check process there in the middle on the top, and how we execute that, but making sure that we space people out and then do the temp checks as they come in with the no-touch thermometers. Cleaning, as I talked about, we've closed down most of our common areas. You can see there the chairs being put on top of the tables so that we don't have people out on a daily basis taking lunch together and sitting down at the tables, so we've closed those areas. We've actually made masks ourselves, so being a bedding manufacturer, we have access to a lot of sewing machines, and so that's something we've been able to do to help in the relief effort and made tens of thousands of masks that we've sent to various places, and we actually use those here. So I'm wearing one of our Sealy manufactured face masks with multiple layers of cloth, which has been a good thing, and then we give employees information on how to wear it and the instructions there from the CDC. Another thing here is just one of the signs we've posted. This is something we do in all of our conference rooms now, where we've moved out chairs to make sure that we're in a room like this. There used to be probably 10 chairs in that room, maybe 12, and now there's only 4. So if you do have to have an in-person meeting, that is the room capacity is now much less than it used to be. We've moved out the chairs to make sure it doesn't happen, and then some reminders there about avoiding those meetings if they don't need to have them in person. And then we've got some big signage. You can't really tell the size on the bottom right there. That's probably a 4-foot by 3-foot sign that we've got in our entryway, and we've got those throughout the building. Just reminders to all of our employees about stopping the spread of germs, the importance of hand sanitation. And so we put those up all over. And those are just the CDC posters that we've blown up to make available throughout the workplace. So like I mentioned, what I wanted to talk about was foremost the education and how we're kind of tackling that. I personally have found that employees fall into one of 4 categories right now. There's those that are ready to return at any time. They are, asking to get back to the office as soon as possible. They're sick of working from home and they want to get back to work. You've got another group that they're ready to return, but they have an issue. Most common one is childcare. because the kids are home and they can't get access to daycare or other services. They would like to return but can't because of those issues. There's folks that are in need of an accommodation, whether it be medical or over 65, something like that, where they need some sort of reasonable accommodation potentially that we need to work through. And then the fourth group, which is a decent segment of the population, I would say, and these folks are very concerned about returning to the office. They may not have any reason why they can't, like childcare or medical issues, but they have a very intense fear of returning to the workplace. And I know I've gotten these emails from folks as we've started talking about reopening our offices. Employees are reaching out and they're very worried about it. They want to make sure that their health and safety is foremost in our minds before they return. And so that's why, the things that I've got here are just some tips that we found is, number one, starting with the assumption that they aren't aware of your plans. Even higher level employees, VPs that I interact with, I think we just assumed, because again, we were so just into the details on a day-to-day basis, we thought that folks just knew what we were doing. Well, they don't. And so you can't have that assumption that they know. We need to educate everyone on what our plans are. We actually send out to the employees that are coming back, we put it on their desks when they return. We give them out at the door for people who are coming back because we do get some, now that the office is open a bit more now, we get some that are coming back week to week. And we provide what we call the Playbook. It's our coronavirus Playbook. It's about 12 to 15 pages, and it's got a lot of details about how we're handling different things that we're asking them to do, and things that they should be aware of. I indicate they're using multiple modalities to communicate. We send out emails periodically to make sure that our folks are aware of it. We've given them the written document. We've done calls for managers and other employees where we update groups, whether in one department or larger calls with maybe 150 or 200 people together, just to talk about what's going on, educate them on what's going on, because just sending an email and thinking that everybody read that is not going to do the trick. So we need to utilize multiple modalities, make sure that you have some of these virtual meetings and things to review it, do the signage, do a lot of that. So those that are visual learners are going to learn that way. Those that want to read through things, we're providing stuff to everyone so that they're aware of what's going on. And then making sure that managers are prepared to answer questions. They're really the first line here with their employees, and they are getting a lot of questions. They're talking with their teams on a daily basis for work-related things, and those team members are asking questions about what will this look like when I return. So for a lot of those people, it may still be 3 or 4 weeks out before we're even looking at bringing them back to the office, but it is very much in the forefront of their minds, and they want to know what the company is doing to keep them safe. So the managers need to be able to answer those questions instead of just saying, oh, well, reach out to HR, and HR should be able to answer those questions. So making sure the managers are educated. We've done that through a lot of phone calls as well as talking points and things like that to give managers frequently asked questions and ways to address things when their employees come to them with those issues. So I know I've thrown a lot out there. There's a lot of things we can be doing, but I really do think education is a key part of that. So with that, I'll be quiet and turn it over to the next presenter.
All right. Well, Drew, thank you very much. And here, I actually have one of these fine temporary masks, and I want to mention to the crowd on the line here that you guys are pretty good at making covers for things. And when you had some extra time to keep your employees engaged, they started making these masks and sharing them. So I noticed that all of the Habitat for Humanity offices, 35 of them across the state, were provided those for free. So are all of our tourism and convention offices across the state and our economic development offices. So that's just a short list that I'm aware of the great work you all have done to share those masks. And they're washable, so that makes them really quite valuable. Thank you for doing that and for sharing this information. We really appreciate it, Drew.
You bet. Thank you.
Now we've got another great guest. John Greene is with us, and John is the head of human resources out at Keeneland. That is quite a diverse place. You'll be surprised at how many different kinds of ways he is dealing with this challenge. And so, John, we always delight in having you with us. And I know you've been listening to these calls all these weeks, so you kind of know what the plan is. Take it away and share with us what you'd like to share.
All right, thanks very much. Kudos to you guys again for hosting these calls. They've been I think incredibly valuable. It's been a good way to, if nothing else, realize that we're all feeling a bit of the same pain. And certainly, Jim, thank you for sharing your counsel, albeit perhaps unofficial, but nevertheless sharing your counsel with us as well. So all great. If you can, I'm not sure if I can control the deck here, but if you want to go ahead and slide to the first piece there, thank you very much. Just to give you a little context to what Lyle said a moment ago. We are an 1,100-acre main campus. We also have another facility out on Paris Pike that's very large. But in addition to racing and sales, we kind of operate like a convention center without a hotel. So maybe it gives you a bit of an idea of the scope of our special events business that goes on year-round. And lots of folks ask me, so what do you do when you're not racing? Frankly, we're probably busier when we're not racing than we are when we are racing. Very much of a park-like setting. Keeneland is probably the only track in the country that is essentially open grounds to anybody. So we have folks that want to be out there at all times for various personal needs. We can stable nearly 2,000 horses on the main campus and another 2,000 at the Thoroughbred Training Center on Paris Pike. As a result, we have hundreds of backside workers that are employed by independent trainers that not only are on campus working with their horses, but also living on campus. We operate a dormitory called the Keeneland Lodge. We have some of the grooms that live in the tack rooms, actually in the barns. We operate a community laundry, community bathhouse, a track kitchen that many of you have hopefully been to, but it's required to remain open. We haven't been able to close that because we're still required to feed the backtrack workers. And when we go into races, we go from about 250 full-time employees to nearly tenfold that, with right now about 100 employees that are designated as essential on our payroll. So that's a little bit of context for who we are and some of the challenges. We actually closed, so to speak, on March 16th, but the reality is there's no way to close. We've had security and track and grounds and barn maintenance, track down there all the time, taking care of the assets and, of course, taking care of the equine athletes that are out there. We've worked hard for risk mitigation. It's been a very collaborative process, certainly ongoing iterative process, as we're seeing on these calls that we do with Lyle, where what was the truth yesterday is a different shade of the truth tomorrow. But working with the CDC, the state and federal government, OSHA, EOC, making sure we're not running afoul of that. Also working very closely with Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. I've got a typo there. That should be KHRC. Our executive team, and of course legal counsel and medical experts, but probably more than anything, we've all been going to what I call the Indiana Jones School of Management. If you want to hit that next slide. So if you can see that, in Indiana Jones School of Management is based on one of the great lines in his first movie that, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go. And that's very much been the mode that we've been in, that for all the collaboration of all the experts, the bottom line is it's new territory for almost everybody. So we're trying to kind of live with that degree of ambiguity, make sure that we're comfortable and we take good leadership and first and foremost great care of our employees. But it is very much of a make it up as we go sort of process. So let me tell you where we've been. Next slide. We've had security checkpoints. If you've driven on Versailles Road and driven by Keeneland, you've seen them. But we've had security checkpoints since March 16th.
Yeah, I would think it would.
Leslie, you may want to remute. There you go. That security checkpoint has been set by security officers, third-party medical personnel from our ambulance service provider. We've been doing health questionnaires, temperature checks, assigning color-coded wristbands for each day of the week. That's been going on since March 16th. We rushed the implementation of a mobile communication service that we really hadn't planned to put in place for another month or two, but we jammed it in place. That's designed for non-desktop workers. And as Drew just mentioned, the multiple modes of communication have been critical. This tool enables us to use folks' smartphones in ways that text messaging and emails can't. Videos, lots of embedded information, keeping folks up to date on the unemployment process to the degree that we all think we have a crystal ball on that, risk mitigation efforts, and this is really specific for our seasonal workforce. And this is a group that we've been very concerned about keeping engaged and making sure, particularly with a more senior population, making up the majority of that workforce, that we're able to get different modes to them so that hopefully one of 2 or 3 different ways that we ping them, often several times a week, get to them and resonate with them. We've also been in alternate work arrangements from early day one, work from home, where I am today and have been for the better part of this, pumped up our VPA capabilities, remote desktop services, even took about 50 of our Chromebooks that we use as part of our hiring process and redeployed those to employees that typically worked on a desktop so that they can work from home, and of course the Zoom licenses. And then perhaps most importantly, for those folks that are essential personnel, going to an A/B scheduling system right off the bat, so we basically reduced our on-site footprint by about 50% in terms of who was there each day. Okay, next slide. Right off the bat, we were in the mass claim piece. Our year-round part-time employees, we guaranteed their wages through June 10th, so everybody is still getting paid full-time and year-round part-time. Seasonal's not the same. We have used UV lights and electrostatic germ guns, as we call them, for the Ghostbuster packs that our housekeeping and maintenance team wears to do routine applications forever and special request applications, e.g. in the past, if we had somebody who had a cold or a stomach bug, we'd come in and do a special spray. But in March, we stepped up dramatically by going with a third-party service that uses a service called Everpure, which is a dry fogging barrier. And we fogged essentially the entire campus. This Everpure system is 99% plus effective. And most importantly, it has a 90+ day residual. So once it makes contact, and I mean it's sprayed every building, every square foot, once it makes contact, it has that level of residual, so it's not just like spraying Lysol. And then the areas that are high traffic, we're hitting every 30 days again with that same treatment just to make sure. PPE has been issued from day one, kind of like our friends at Temper Sealy. We've also supplied an awful lot Central Kentucky community. We modified track kitchen operations. Again, we had to leave that open. Lots of additional barriers and shields installed. And we also began and have now tested on campus over 500 of our backside personnel and essential Keeneland personnel. So we've been very proactive on testing. Next slide, please. So where we are now, security checkpoint's going to stay in place. So we'll continue to ask the questions every time you come on campus. Okay. Every time you come on campus, we'll do that. We've also got temperature checks every day when you come in. We've got our internal healthy at work, which sounded a lot like the playbook Drew was talking about, which is designed to all employees receive an extensive Q&A section that's been distributed to them. We're going to start to return non-essential personnel on June 15th. And to do that, we've come up with the rocket science, but come up with an over-under 80% productivity metric that we've used. And then working with the managers of each department, really trying to be as granular as possible about, can Susie Smith be 80% productive from home, and has she proven to have that capability in what she's demonstrated? Or is she not able to be? In large part, that's often due to the fact that she may need access to specialized equipment that's only available at the office. But that's how we've tried to break it down. And as of June 15th, those that are in that less than 80% productive category will start to phase back into the office on the AB schedule. We've expanded PPE. There's now refillable hand sanitizer on every desk. We've got over 50 common area hand sanitizers that have been added and mounted to the walls, in addition to what you've always seen out here. Every employee's got a box of the nitrile gloves on their desk, and we've supplied masks that are manufactured, as well as ones that our own staff has actually fabricated. Next slide. We've reconfigured our office space, particularly those common areas that lend to that to ensure social distancing. We're requiring masks at all times in common areas and open air cubicles. keeping break rooms closed. We'll continue to use our in-house electrostatic guns on high-touch areas, door handles, light switches, and so on. And we're going to make sure that everything that we're doing is just as strong as what we do from a patron perspective in terms of those high-traffic areas really being emphasized, including time clocks. Although for the most part, we've monitored the utilization of those so that utilization will be limited. Most people are just reporting hours, if you will, versus punching in, so to speak. A lot of attention being given to shared tools, everything from kitchen equipment to phones, radios, keys, you name it. So as things are handed off, they're required to go through their own sanitation process as well. Next. One of the things we're doing in addition to the checkpoints that are on campus that check temperature every day when an employee reports to work, and by the way, these checkpoints are 24/7. We are a 24/7 operation. But we're also encouraging employees to check their own temperatures before they leave home. The hope is that if they recognize they've got a temperature there, they won't come in the first place. And those that either don't come in or as a result of the test on campus disclose symptoms or have a fever of over 100.4 are going to be denied entrance and will be part of the contact process to take them through how we're going to triage that and treat that. Lots of things here in terms of following the CDC guidelines and what we're doing. Probably the last bullet there is that if we have somebody that we believe logically has been in close contact to someone who's been infected, obviously we're going to report that we have an active outbreak. We won't disclose names from a PHI perspective, but we will send the employee home at that point. We will facilitate testing for them and then permit them to return to work if they're not showing any symptoms. But we'll retest them again within 10 days to ensure nothing has popped up if symptoms still aren't manifesting themselves. And I think the next slide is next. So good news, where are we going? Well, great news is no Keeneland employees have tested positive to date. That's something we're very proud of, particularly given the environment and high touch that we operate in. We've been really instrumental in the creation of the Project Nourish program here in the city. That's been a huge success, and our culinary staff has been working hard on that. Racing a scheduled return in July. No patrons, limited, probably no food service, frankly, other than track kitchen. And the employee footprint will really be limited to those essential personnel that are already working. So it'll be very different from normal, but we're thrilled to get the horses back on the track and on TV for the enjoyment of our patrons. September sale will happen. It's the largest in the world, critical to the industry. We expect it to be a virtual event, and that's not all that different in many ways from what it is now with a lot of folks that call in from around the world for video in, but nevertheless, it'll be a very different animal. And the October race meet, Breeders' Cup, November sale, all remain to be seen. So again, Indiana Jones is hard at work and making things up as he goes. Thanks, folks.
All right, John, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And that's interesting. That horse is going to be a different animal, you said, and it'll be certainly a different process on it. It'll be fun. Thank you. And now we have another special guest. Erin Sharp is here with us. She's the Group Vice President for Manufacturing for the Kroger Company. I have my card here, Erin, my frequent Kroger card. And we appreciate all you're doing to keep that pipeline full of good products for us. And you've got some good slides to share with us. I have a bag of these little cuties or whatever. Are just in my kitchen right now. I love those things. So take it away. Tell us what's going on at Kroger. We're just delighted you're here to join us.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity. Just wanted to kind of share a little bit. You know, Kroger's learned and continues to learn a lot while keeping our stores and our supply chain open and really serving not only the great state of Kentucky, but the whole country through the pandemic. And the other thing that we're really proud of is being able to share what we're learning and really with the intention of helping both retailers, restaurants, manufacturers, because, you know, we're in all these spaces. We're not just a grocery store. But our objective is to help everybody reopen safely and in sync with their respective, regulatory requirements, as well as with what the CDC is recommending and their states are recommending. So you can go to the next slide. What I'm going to share with you is really an excerpt from our overall blueprint as it relates to manufacturing. Brad and Lyle asked me to kind of share, what we've done across our manufacturing network. I lead a team that leads 35 food manufacturing facilities across the country, all in food. So we are strictly a food manufacturer, but we've, as I heard when I was able to jump in, the gentleman from Keene say, we didn't have a blueprint or a playbook or a game plan when this thing hit. I keep telling my team, this is the classic example of situational leadership, because every day we're faced with something different that we have to maneuver through and take care of our associates. So our overarching theme has been to keep our facilities safe for our associates, and then keep them open to not only be able to serve and maintain the supply chain, but we've seen an unprecedented increase in demand, as we all know, through the food supply chain. And because our manufacturing plants are servicing only retail, we've seen a huge spike, because we don't have the offsetting food service softness to necessarily balance. So it has been a challenge. So if you could do the next slide, please. And again, I'm gonna kind of hit the highlights here, just and leave some time for Q&A if there's any questions. But we've really, as we've thought about, how do we keep our facilities open and our associates safe, and really it's that safe, not only from a real risk, but it's a perceived risk as well when it comes to our associates. The emotional aspects of engaging with our associates and helping them feel comfortable in coming to work every day has been as big a part of this as the actual physical risk of keeping the COVID virus out of our facilities. So we've focused on these 6 areas to really make sure that we're buttoned up and bolster our existing procedures. So really around enhancing our existing safety procedures, and safety we think of in 2 respects: customer safety, which is food safety, and associate or employee safety. And then monitoring and supporting our employee health, establishing vendor and visitor guidelines, because these plants are 24/7, and we do need to have some individuals come in and out of our facilities. And then the whole concept of physical distancing and the challenge that has in the manufacturing world. How we've had to adjust schedules for both our office and support staff, as well as our hourly associates working on the floor. And then, of course, all of this adhering to our already strict food safety guidelines. So next slide, please. And again, I'm going to try to keep to the high road here on each of these slides. And there's a lot of words, and I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. But we think around enhancing safety procedures in several different ways. Educating employees is the first one, and that's really about our communication through the facilities. Oops, can you just go back for a second? And it's really around making sure that we have good communication through the facilities around, whether it's washing hands, maintaining PPE, and social distancing. So it's a lot of visual leadership through here. Next slide, please. And then educating our suppliers and visitors around who should be coming to the plant, who doesn't need to come to the plant. How do we manage more in a touchless manner from a receiving receiving personnel and all the things that are coming in and out of our plants, and making sure we have a robust plan. Next slide, please. Oops, you skipped one. There we go. PPE, there's, we've gone through the gamut on PPE. Initially, the CDC was saying it didn't, make sense for people that were non-symptomatic to be wearing face masks. And so we followed those guidelines. We have certain required tasks that require whether it's a face mask or an N95 mask for safety, but we've now moved to everyone in the facility is wearing a face mask unless they have a physical restriction, and then we have face shields. We do have face shields for several of our tasks where it's a little bit of a challenge to maintain that 6-foot distance, but the associates will wear a mask under those face shields. Next slide, please. And then we have we've really bolstered our sanitation protocol around all common areas. And we've done this not only, on a regular basis, but when we have a positive or we have, maybe a small cluster of positives in a facility, we've actually on occasion in several of our plants taken the entire facility down for a shift and done a full sanitation top to bottom, with particular focus on common areas, break rooms, locker rooms, all the employee entrances and exits. Our sanitation of our floors, we have a robust sanitation protocol, so that is really covered on our normal periodic sanitation cycles. Next, please. And then the monitoring and supporting our employee health, here again, education is key. We are doing temperature checks at, when folks come into work, and this is all of our associates, hourly and non-hourly, and of course, coaching and educating folks about staying home. We've also increased our PTO and made it possible for folks to stay home and not lose any pay as a result. So that's never a reason for folks not to stay home. Next one. Making sure you have a good plan for vendor and visitors in your facility. We actually are still under a restriction of only essential visitors into our plants. We've curtailed all non-essential capital projects that required contractors to come into our facilities. And, we ensure that when somebody is in, that they're separated from our associates. They're not allowed to use our common areas, restrooms, break rooms, et cetera. So we've ensured that we've maintained that separation to protect our associates. Next, please. And then obviously physical distancing is a challenge in many manufacturing facilities. Ours are no different. We do have many tasks that are separated, but in those areas where, the actual process itself is fairly tight and close where folks have to work, we've put up creative, boundaries and barricades and coached and educated our associates on how to interact with each other in a safe way. So, and I am extremely proud of our team. With all of our plants, we have not had to shut down any of our facilities because we have not been able to staff them or because we've had an outbreak. So, and we do have several plants, and this is one that is in Kentucky here that the pictures are of our Bowling Green, Kentucky Country Oven Bakery. We have 600 associates working in that plant. And we have just been blessed with the ability to continue to run and keep our associates safe. Next, please.
Good work, by the way.
Thank you. And then adjusting hours. This is a big part of being able to maintain that social distancing. Obviously the challenge on the floor speaks for itself, and those pictures tell a daily reality. But the other areas that are a concern are break rooms, locker rooms, time clocks, all the areas where there's a normal kind of gathering at certain times of particularly shifts, starts and stops. And so we've, through all of our plants, done as much as we can to even take 15-minute increments and adjust people's schedules so that we don't have that congregation in those areas. And that has allowed relief in the break rooms as well. So they've really adopted a whole different schedule when it comes to folks interacting with each other. Next, please. And then lastly, food safety guidance. This really challenges all of us to go back and look at our overall food safety plans. I mean, every food plant has a food safety protocol, but these situations really, really should force all of us to go and revisit those plans, ensure they're as robust as we think they are, do that hazard analysis as we talk here, and challenge ourselves to be the best that we can be. So again, this is what we recommend for anybody in the food business. So I think that's it. I think the last slide is questions. I whipped through here fast. I was told to think about five minutes or so. So I just wanted to give everybody a little flavor for, one, how we have been operating over the last 8 weeks, and how we've been able to stay open and keep our associates safe, and hopefully we can share some learnings and help somebody else along the way. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was great. And folks, she's in an all-day meeting, so she just slipped out during her lunch break to join us. And it's so important to all of us that we have a safe and continuous food supply, and Kroger is a big part of providing that to people in our state. So let's see. Why don't we're actually doing so well on time. This is great. Let's go ahead and open it up for some questions. Allison and Autumn, if you all want to share some. I've seen a lot on the chat line below, but why don't you all throw out some questions to John or Erin? And I believe Drew had to leave us, but see if we can't take some questions now.
Okay. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions. A lot of them are about the Paycheck Protection Loan, which I know none of you probably want to speak to at this moment. Let's see. So I heard, I believe it was Erin, talk about face shields instead of masks for some people who are suffering from issues that mean they can't wear a mask. Are there any other accommodations that you all have had to make for unique health issues?
Really, it's the masks that some folks will, either if they've got asthma or slight breathing irregularities, they find wearing a mask for extended periods of time may be a little challenging. So we have allowed them the use of these, and they're plexiglass. So they basically you've got a band around your head, like a kind of a headband thing, and then the plexiglass covers the face. So that's really been the main accommodation for for the masks. Gloves, everybody wears gloves all day long in the plant, and they're encouraged to change them on a regular basis.
Okay, we've got a question for Keeneland and Kroger. So what's been the most surprising or challenging issue that you've run into with transitioning people back to work?
Oh, back to work? Well, with our manufacturing facility, we've never left work. But for our office folks, I'm working from home, and we've got, most of our support teams out of Cincinnati are working from home. And we're actually in the process of transitioning some folks back now. And the challenge, I'd say the biggest challenge is the social distancing, the physical distancing, and the fact that we have a high-rise building with elevators that get folks up and down between their floors. So it's really around I'd say elevator capacity is one of the biggest constraints in how many people you can safely have in the office at any given time.
I have a question for John along those lines, but also I'm assuming you may have dealt with this more than Kroger, but how are you handling the employees that are refusing to come back because they know they're going to make more money on unemployment than they are on regular pay? because I'm dealing with that with all of my clients.
Yeah, that's been a concern I think from day one, the way it was structured is so beneficial to be on unemployment, frankly. The good news is we haven't really had to deal with that yet, simply because we haven't been back in racing mode or in any sort of special events mode that would require us to recall, if you will, a large number of our employees. My concern had been if the 26-week period were to run, into October, that gosh, we were racing, which is still an unknown in terms of patrons, what that would look like and when people return. Conversely, we've got, I can't tell you how many of our employees that continually volunteer, hey, can I work as a director level, can I come in and run the weed eater, and, do work around the fence post and stuff like that? Can I come in and volunteer to work a security shift? And we've got a bunch of our folks who are doing that right now, simply because they feel guilty about, in most cases, continuing to get paid either by UI benefits or simply by our own corporate programs. So it's been interesting to see how that works. The one thing on the questions asked a moment ago that has been interesting to me, and this isn't a return to work issue, but was more of an essential personnel issue. We've had some really difficult personal situations with employees that, for one reason or another at home, had real challenges with their spouse wanting them to come into the home when they left work. And beyond just having to, strip down in the garage and shower and do those sorts of things, we've had some of them that basically the family has said, for fear of infecting our family, you're going to have to go to the hunting lodge that you keep. And we've had some strange things we've had to do to help some of our employees basically open up a second residence in order to keep their family safe and be able to retain a valuable person. So there's been, again, that Indiana Jones piece of an awful lot of makeup as you go and try to make sure you're not going to step onto a slippery slope.
Thank you. All right, Allison, any other questions, or Autumn?
Does not look like it.
All right. Well, we really appreciate, John, your being here, and Erin for joining us. Thank you very much. And
happy to help.
You bet. Keep those products flowing.
We've got 3 manufacturing facilities in Kentucky, so we appreciate everything you're doing.
And we appreciate Brad Patrick for recommending you to us. Brad, thanks. I know you're on the call. We appreciate it. Let me mention that we're trying each week to bring to you people and organizations that have experiences that we hope will enhance what you're trying to do. And if somebody has some recommendations for us, we're certainly glad to reach out to those people and see if we can't get them on to join us. We've got a couple more things we want to wrap up with. And Jim, I'd like to, let's talk about this Healthy at Work officer. I'll say a few things about it. You started off talking about it today, and then Jim, you might have some other things. I know there's some PPP questions too. So if you'll go on to that, this slide, you've got it there. We had quite a few questions after the last call about the Healthy at Work officer. And of course, there's not a lot of information on that out there. So we actually talked to some people, did our own research, and we're in the business of writing job descriptions. So we wrote a job description. And then we sent it to the governor's office and said, hey, what do you think about this? Could this be helpful? And actually, they gave us an interesting reply on that was, yeah, this is pretty good and it could be helpful, but we're trying to keep this wide open and not put too much, be too restrictive on companies. So we're not going to, send out a job description, but we thought it might be helpful for you also. We've put it together, and it's on a couple of slides here just to give you some ways of thinking about this, because we're all supposed to have a Healthy at Work officer. And I'd say it's going to be up to your judgment who you select, but this might give you some good ideas of ways to go about it and think about who would be best suited for this. And I suspect a lot of you have already gotten over this hurdle, but those of you who haven't, this slide and the next slide have some information. And of course, those of you that are new to this call, and we seem to have new people every week, we'll be sending out these slides later today. And we'll also send out some responses to your questions that we've replied to in the chat box down below. And so, Jim, you want to say anything more about this? And then let's get to your questions. How about that?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, this is, we worked with Hanna Resource in conjunction. They threw it at me and I made some recommendations and then we sent it out. Let me go to the next one so that you can see everything. And my recommendation to the governor was, look, okay, let's go with the first description here. Then the second was more of a job description and how we would fill it in a human resource, what type of person would fit best and so on. And when we got the response, I just want everybody to know we're still working on things like this, trying to use whatever connections we can to help the Kentucky companies. Because when we got the response from the governor's office, it made sense from, they're like, well, we want everybody to have flexibility to do what they want to do. I wrote back and I said, that's great with one except, which is everybody here needs guidance. And everybody here wants to make sure they don't get hit with some frivolous lawsuit or meritorious lawsuit later because, well, look at what Kroger, for example, hypothetically, look at what Kroger's doing and look at what so-and-so did, and having a jury look at that and go, wow, okay, they really didn't step up to the plate. Governor said they had to do it and they didn't identify somebody. So the recommendation, as I said earlier, was I think it's time for let's have these recommendations. I'm going to toggle back and forth so you can see the one before. Let's have these. Let's have a healthy at work description. And if the governor doesn't want to give us any guidance on what the person really should or shouldn't do, fine. Then we need to have a good faith, good Samaritan along the lines of, and I pushed for this in some of the states and I've been successful in getting it, the good Samaritan rule for donation of food. If McDonald's, for example, or Kroger has food and they want to donate it, a lot of the states have come out with a good faith, what they call good Samaritan law, where if you donate the food to a known source and you follow certain rules, if anybody gets sick, you can't be sued. You're immune from a lawsuit because you were trying to do a good thing. I think the governor could go a long way with this if the Healthy at Work officer had a good faith, or the employer who designates one has a good faith exception, so that if you identify someone, if you do the tracing to the best of your ability, if you have no way, and some of the things like the Kroger, how can they trace their customers that may have been in contact with somebody at the deli or somebody at the front counter or any number of situations? So it should be spelled out that, yes, you will do these things in good faith. And so long as you can demonstrate good faith, then you can't be sued for some technicality in the identification of a Healthy at Work officer that didn't meet certain specifications that somebody else decided. And one of the questions that was in the chat session was, so can we outsource the temperature check? And the answer is yes. But then, what happens if, and again, I'm not all about the legal, but I'm giving legal guidance. What happens if you get sued because, well, your person that did it didn't calibrate it every day the right way, but LabCorp did? Well, we need some good faith exceptions here to protect the commerce, the companies, all of you that are doing employment and getting people into the workforce. Keeneland shouldn't be sued if somebody gets through their screening at the front because their temperature didn't show up at a 100.4. If they've done everything that they should do and they followed all the procedures, then there should be an exemption from a lawsuit. If they didn't do it in good faith, okay, fine. That company can be brought to task in front of a jury and sued. But I'm trying to get some common sense things pushed through so that when I'm giving these legal guidances, I can say, hey, guys, do the best you can. The Indiana Jones thing, I love that because that's how I feel every day, because it's changing literally every single day. I give guidance and then I look and I'm like, oh crap, this morning they're coming up with new updates and it's changing what we're talking about. So we're still pushing that. And anything you guys send to us where you're like, hey, you know what, I've got a question, this is what we're dealing with, I take some of those, and then we talk after these, and we try to come up with new plans. Ideas, let us know. Then the other thing, we're like, okay, so we've talked to some of the people in the state, the local, the medical side, the business side. Who do we need to push on to say, we've got problems here? Let's address some of the problems. Now, I can't do anything about the PPP. I can't do anything about the SBA. I do know that we didn't talk about it today, but the EIDL is broken, not as bad as the Kentucky unemployment, but they sent out notices this past weekend telling people that their application, because they sent multiple applications, this application's being closed, and yet some of those people didn't send multiple applications, they only sent one. So, and there's no ability to log in and say, "Nuh-uh, please change," or "help, I can't get anywhere," because you can't even check the status of your loan. It just shows up in your bank account. If you did an EIDL, keep track of your bank account, because all of a sudden the money will just show up. That's the 10,000 or up to 10,000. The other one you have to sign to get some of it. So just keep looking at your bank account and check your spam on your emails. But I wanted to just walk through with this, the 2 pages. We sent the recommendation. It was very pleasant with them. They weren't, telling us, "Yeah, no, you're out to lunch, we're not going to do it." They thanked us, but then they told us, "Hey, we just want everybody to have flexibility." And that's when I immediately wrote back and said, flexibility doesn't work in the legal world, where people are going to be held to the mandate of the governor, and there's nothing there that says we want you to be flexible. If they would put that in there, if they would update it and say, healthy at work officer, just use your best judgment, be as flexible as you want to be, great. Then that means that there's a lot less stress, because it doesn't say must and shall. And if you don't, then you should have never opened. And if anybody gets exposed, then they're going to sue you. That's the fear I've got, because if I'm giving you guidance during this thing, I want to make sure we do it the right way. So those are the things that we're working on, and we would be happy to take any others that you have to the governor, to the mayor, to whatever authority, if we have a connection, to try to get things moving. I've learned more from the questions you all ask me and trying to assist in these things than the presentations, but that's what it's all about. We're trying to get through this, and none of us really understands. It's the first time for all of us going through something like this. So
I think we're getting some more questions in. Allison, do you have some things you want to share with us?
Yes. So one question is, if temporarily laid off employees were in positions that are now eliminated due to funding losses, do you have to offer them other open positions within the company? I'm assuming this is related to the PPP.
So I guess I'm not sure I'm following, but I'm assuming that you had a temporary person that went into the calculations for PPP, but that position is no longer needed. It's difficult to say due to funding, though, because the PPP was set out to make sure you had adequate funding. So my recommendation would be, if that person was let go and was not currently employed at the time that you went into lockdown, so we're talking February 15th forward, you would need to replace head count, but maybe not with that same exact person in that same exact position. And I don't believe you have to do a good faith offer of employment to that person, because that person was not on payroll at the time that you went into lockdown. The good faith offer of employment are to those people who were regularly employed before you shut down and you're wanting to come back, not necessarily to the seasonal employees or part-time employees that are no longer needed. I'm not saying that John was the one, but just taking Keeneland, for example, they applied for a PPP. I'm sorry, not saying they did. If they applied for a PPP and they got the monies, they may not need the same temporary employees during the 8 week, but they might need more grooms, or they might need more kitchen staff, but not greeters. So I think it's a little different when you're talking about seasonal or part-time employees that were not on payroll at the time of this incident occurring. But if you have serious questions about that and that particular thing, I would talk to your CPA and your bank. And if you've looked at the chats, I've made that comment a few times. Make sure you talk to your bank, because your bank is the one that will make the decision about the PPP loan. And I do want to say again, I apologize to Keeneland. I have no clue whether they applied for the PPP. That was not a suggestion one way or the other. I was just using an example.
Great. And then we have a question. So if an employee who is customer facing tests positive for COVID, how many days back from their originally feeling, basically how many days back from originally feeling ill do customers need to be informed by the Healthy at Work officer?
So I was trying to pull that up. There's an actual date listed in the one that I shared with everybody earlier. Give me a second. Let me see if it's still there. Or if I closed out of it. Yeah, there it is. So what you have to do is, it says 2 days somewhere, and I was trying to find where it said that. My recollection is that Kentucky had a 2-day track for, here it is, who could have been in close contact defined as being within 6 feet or more for more than 30 minutes with that employee in the 2 days prior to the employee testing positive. So the good news for customer, I've talked about the concerns I have about this tracing and the fact that it's mandatory. Most of you who have a customer base are not face-to-face for 30 minutes. If you're looking at, like, I'm going to use Kroger as my example, you've got a teller at the front that meets with people and has them go through. They're not talking to them for 30 minutes. They're talking to them for 2. The recommendation is everybody over the last 2 days that's had constant contact for 30 minutes or more. So that's to answer the question about how far back. It's 2 days, but it's also people who have had contact for a continuous time period for more than just a split second. So.
Good input.
I'm sorry, Lyle?
I said that's good input. That helps clarify it, I think. Allison, anything else?
Yes, so we had someone who's just looking for clarification. They said, am I understanding correctly that for the PPP, if the headcount drops due to employees voluntarily resigning or other employment, then that reduction is not held against us for forgiveness?
That's correct. But what you're going to have to do with a voluntary is demonstrate a written offer of employment that has been rejected that you then have to show to the state. And your letter needs to be done very carefully, because you have to comply with each one of those. It must be in writing, must be the same position, must be for the same hours, must be for the same salary, must be rejected. You must have documentation. And then you must report that to the state unemployment office that this person was offered an employment and didn't accept it. So that it's a little different than it was before. It's been my recommendation that you put it in writing, that you have documentation. That was just kind of common sense, but now they're saying you have to report it to the state. And clearly, I think they're doing that so that they can start investigating if people got the $600 federal. They're going to do a cross-reference of Social Security numbers and recollect that money from anybody that double-dipped or turned down an offer that they didn't need. The one that's not covered is the death. That's why I said death certificate. The question right now is you are required to prove. I seriously doubt your bank's going to require you to prove death with a death certificate. But if you can get an obituary, a notice, a comment from an employee's spouse that says so-and-so passed away, you're going to want to document that, just like any other effort when you're terminating or eliminating benefits and pay.
Okay, so we've had some requests to share out the Healthy at Work description and also the link to the newest interim final SBA guidance for forgiveness. Both of those will, the link is embedded in the PowerPoint, correct, Jim?
Yeah, but I just did the one link, which is the for the Kentucky, and I'm going to do the Treasury as well. It just takes me a second to get over to it. I'm going to pull up the Treasury. The problem with the Treasury is that it is literally multiple PDFs, but I'm just going to put you to the Treasury.gov COVID site. And then when you get to the COVID site, you can click on them because there were 5 that I mentioned today. So what you're going to do is go to this website, scroll down below where the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program is discussed, and then it has the tools, the calculation. It has some things I didn't mention, which is the roundup. There's still about $200 million left. They had $240 million is left. I'll drag that down on the screen so you can see it. Just
By the way, Jim's putting this on the chat, the Zoom group chat. When he said refers to a link, he's actually putting those links on that chat.
And then the other thing is here, your total loans, total amount, net dollars are $511 billion, and there's still $139 billion left. I think that we've run out of businesses to apply. There's a whole lot of stats. The one I was going to scroll down to is Kentucky is listed right here. There's been $5,191,746,574 that's been loaned in Kentucky so far for 45,384 different businesses. If you've not applied for your loan and you think you want to, there's still money available. The first one was a rush, and obviously I believe that they've adequately scared bigger for-profit publicly traded companies away. Most of those, including the hedge funds, which really sucked up a lot of the money, have returned that money in the first one. So that's why there's still a lot of money out there. You need to get those applications done because I think the time was June 30th. Don't quote me on that. That was week 2, but I think it's June 30th. That's when the SBA loan stops. So get your loans in. I did put those on the chat, and I did see a question from somebody asking because they don't see the chat. If you go into your control panel, there's a more button. You can click on more and click on chat, and then you can see it, and then you can also copy it and keep it for yourself and see all of the comments that are in there and all of the emails and anything else that we've posted up there. So those are what's next.
All right, so we've got somebody asked, I heard that if an employee was laid off, returns to work, and unfortunately gets laid off again, they would no longer be eligible for the additional $600. Do we have any insight?
Not true. Not true, with the exception of, did I mention that the Kentucky Unemployment Insurance Commission is broken? So the reality is this, and this was a recommendation we gave in week 2 and week 3. If you get the PPP loan, pay your people for the 8 weeks. If you then are still on some kind of shutdown or reduced time due to the shutdown, put them back on unemployment. Full unemployment, they will be able to get because it is a week-to-week determination. They will go in, they will say that they performed no work this week. They'll get that week's payment. The problem that we're running into is this work share reduction. Employers who have their employees go in and say, I worked 50% of the time, the unemployment office is completely rejecting them, and then they can't get the $600 from the federal. That's not how it was supposed to work. If you reduce hours, you were supposed to be able to get unemployment as well, and that's the part that's broken. But that statement, it should not. I won't say it won't, because I'm still waiting on at least one person at one of the companies I provide services for to get paid from their original application. So I won't say that your people will automatically get the $600, but if you have people working and then you have to lay them back off, by definition, unemployment is a separation from employment. That's the old definition without work share. So if you have your employee working for you and you lay them off, fire them, furlough, whatever term you want to use. From that date forward, they are entitled to unemployment, period. Whether or not you want to call it a second furlough, a second work share, a second anything. The only problem you're going to run into, in my opinion, will be on that work share calculation, because the system is flat kicking anybody out if they worked at all for anybody. So, should not be a problem. Each state has its own unemployment. Kentucky's allows you to file every time you're late in keeping. That's my recommendation.
All right. So this is a question. Since some employees will not be able to return to work due to childcare and may not be working 3 hours a week, we recoup the payroll tax credit from these employees, and what documentation is required?
Oh, so we're into the payroll tax credits. Read the question back fully. First of all, I'm not an accountant, so you're going to get a non-answer probably, but I want to see if I can answer any part of that.
Okay. Since some employees will not be able to return to work due to childcare and not be working 40 hours per week, can we recoup the payroll tax credits on these employees, and what documentation is required?
I'm not sure. I will look into that and see if I can answer it. And I do have an answer for a question that was asked last week that I was dilatory in responding to, and I apologize. I intended to. If you've exhausted FMLA or FMLEA, you are entitled to the 2-week or 10-day sick leave benefits and any other state benefits. That was asked last week, and I said I need to look into it. And someone kindly reminded me that I hadn't done that. So I went ahead and pulled that up while the presentation was going on, and verified that it is available. On the tax credit issue, I'm not positive on the interplay between the sick leave, the fact that those people can't come back, the PPP. There are so many moving parts with that gets into an extraordinarily complex legal and accounting function. So I apologize, I don't have an answer, but that would require a bunch of research into the FFCRA, the CARES Act, the state, the employee tax credit. I'm assuming, since you're talking about an employee tax credit, that you're not getting the PPP, or that it's outside of the 8 weeks. So you see the kind of questions I'd have to look at to figure out how to answer it. I don't know that I have that ability. I mean, I do, sorry. I don't know that I have that ability while we're on the call to try to figure out all of the moving parts. So that would be more complex than I can answer right now.
All right, great. Then another question is just about the interpretation of the rehiring portion of the PPP. So where it says we have until June 30th to restore full-time employment and salary levels for changes made between February 15th and April 26th. The question is that just restoring them moving forward, or does that mean you have to look backwards and repay them for monies they lost during that time period?
No, this was a safe harbor built in. So you've got a problem if you need to meet the 75% threshold. Okay, so I'm not talking about the 75% going to payroll, all of those calculations. The only thing I'm talking about is you must rehire headcount by June 30th. So if you hire headcount by June 30th, then you're out of the headcount issue, but you still have to meet the 75% threshold. So hypothetically speaking, you could wait until June 30th to bring back your full workforce. But that doesn't help you in getting loan forgiveness. Now, one of the clients that I think I mentioned before in Illinois that was asking for guidance, they run a manufacturing facility, and the comment was, look, we're not going to just pay people to stay at home. We'll figure out the essential personnel, but we're not interested in just throwing money away, but we will take the money at a 1% to pay our employees for the rest of the year once we open. He said, so what do I need to do? And so what he's going to do is make sure that what they're going to do is make sure that they hire everybody before June 30th and start the process. but they weren't worried about meeting the 75% threshold because they weren't looking for forgiveness across the board. So the answer to the question, I know it's long-winded, but I want to make sure we cover the different aspects of that. In all of this, you have to keep in mind the calculations. You have three different ones. One is head count. You have until June 30th to hire everybody back. But the other one is the 75%. If you're going to spend the money, you have to figure out who to pay in payroll to meet the 75% of the full threshold. The third one is if you don't meet 75%, then you have to take the amount you paid for payroll, and don't ask me how, because this is all an algebraic calculation. If you do that divided by 3, add that in, then that's how you end up with your total 75% calculation. So if you had $80,000, $100,000 loan, $70,000 in payroll costs, then you didn't meet the threshold, 30,000 went out for unrelated. Then you do your multiplication, and the most that you can claim is $93,333, because that is 75,000 or 70,000 times the 1/3 to come up with the 23,333 other allowable expenses. And last week I talked about it. The guy talked about it the wrong way in the Forbes article. Now that's been described as an algebraic calculation, and I've seen the way it works on the AICPA website. That's how it works. If you need more information on it, look at the AICPA, because like I said, I don't like doing my own taxes.
All right. One more, Allison, if you've got it.
Okay, well, I think, so we've actually had some people helping each other in the chat, which is great. One of the questions was just, if an employee calls in with a temperature but doesn't have any other symptoms, can we require them to get tested?
Yes, you can, and I just started to answer that as well. Anytime that anybody has any of the symptomology, you can require a return to work from a primary care physician or from one of the testing facilities. Also, as we talked in week 7 or week 8, the EEOC guidelines have now allowed during the pandemic only, as long as the CDC has declared a pandemic, you can require your employees to go through temperature checks, medical background checks that are in accordance with the CDC guidelines, and you can require them to actually get a COVID-19 test before returning to work. What hasn't been answered, and what I've been dealing with now, is, okay, so how often can we require somebody to get a COVID-19 test? So since that question was asked, let me throw out the answer I've been giving. We've been recommending to people that they can at least do a once a week test or once every 14-day test. We don't want to inundate the free testing facilities, and we don't want to require people to go ridiculously often, but you can, for a healthy workforce, require your employees to go get tested and demonstrate proof of a negative test. And you can require a doctor note. What we've been suggesting is, now they're doing these tests. If you've had one done or if you've seen one, they're sending an email to the person that took the test saying, here are the results. That result page can be forwarded as proof of the fact that you've passed your COVID-19 test to be able to come into work. Some of the employers I work for have said, okay, we're going to require it first, then we're going to fall back on symptomology from then on, because we don't want it to be a harassment to our employees. And the other part of it, if you want to look at the strict legal, is, okay, so are you paying your employees to go sit in line at one of the testing facilities? Because if you require them to go through anything, you're supposed to pay them as the employer of record. The other thing is, what happens if they get in, this is just all silliness, but just so you know how I have to think, what happens if they get into an accident on the way to the testing facility and it was at your direction? Is that workers' comp? Those are the things that keep me awake at night, and those are the things that, you're always going to have the purely legal versus the risk management side of things. So that's how that rolls.
Good to know. Okay. And
All right.
one more quick one, just how do you recommend people handle those that refuse to test?
If they refuse to test, they're refusing a directive from an employer that is authorized and in fact mandated under governor and CDC requirements for a safe and healthy return to work. You can fire them, period. Because you have a governor mandate, those 14 things, you are required to test them. If an employee refuses to test, that is a refusal of a reasonable request from an employer under standards established by the governor during the pandemic. Again, don't do this once the pandemic is lifted, because then you're requiring a physical examination or some type of medical procedure that is not allowed under ADA. But the CDC controls, governor mandate says they can't report to work without taking it. So if somebody refuses to report to work, you can fire them, you can discipline them, or the softer approach, and my recommendation would be, unless you really don't like the person, have your human resources send that person a notification of the governor's mandate and say, we are not doing this to harass. We're not doing this voluntarily. We are under a governor mandate. We ask you to reconsider, because your alternative is we'll have to let you go and replace you, because we can't let you in the building to do your job without going through the screening required by the governor's mandate. That would be how I would handle it, unless you don't like the person. Then the answer is take the test. If they don't take the test, then you write them up for insubordination and violation of governor mandate. See, you have discretion. That's where you can fire somebody, or you be nice to them.
Jim, you want to flip over to the last slide? I think we've added a note on there.
Yeah.
We have got, we've got the SHRM code certification came through to us. HRCI, I guess they're all on vacation. I don't know. Anyway, we'll have that and we'll follow up with that. But I'm glad we're continuing to get the SHRM certification for people. And we sure enjoyed having everybody on board. Any final last minute, got to share thoughts from John? You're still on. I think probably Erin has gone back to her meeting. Anybody else need to add anything? Well, thank you for joining us. Allison, all for your good work. Chase, keeping up with all these people in and out, good work. And let's have a good week, and we'll be back online next Monday at 11 o'clock. And we certainly are taking any of your questions during the week, and we look forward to talking again. Thank you all. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you all.
You bet.